There is someone who left your life, maybe recently, maybe, but the wound is still present in a way that surprises you when you encounter it. A familiar song, a similar, a quiet moment when the memory surfaces without warning and the absence feels as fresh as it did the day they went. You have asked yourself why. You have replayed conversations, decisions, moments where things might have gone differently. You have wondered what you did wrong, what you should have said, what you could have done to make them stay. God says, stop. Stop blaming yourself for a departure that was never about your failure. Because the person who left was not taken from you. They were removed. And God says the hand that removed them was not acting against your happiness. It was acting in defense of your destiny. This week, God says, your real blessing walks in, not a replacement, not a consolation prize. The person and the provision that was always yours, delayed only by the presence of the one who just left. Emilia God says he understands something that is rarely spoken about, honestly, in spiritual spaces. The specific, complicated, sometimes shameful pain of being the one who was left. Because the pain of being left is not just grief. Grief is clean in a certain way. It has a clear source and a clear direction. The pain of being left carries something extra, something that is harder to admit and harder to process. It carries the question of worthiness, the quiet, devastating internal question that surfaces no matter how many times you tell yourself it is not true. Was I not enough? That question is one of the most spiritually damaging things a human being can carry, because it is a direct attack on the identity that God placed in you before you were born. And God says the enemy knew exactly what he was doing when he sent this person into your life and then removed them. Not just the leaving was designed to be the final step in a longer plan. The plan was not simply to take someone from you. The plan was to take someone from you in a way that left behind a question about your value, your lovability, your enoughness, that would continue to do damage long after the person themselves was gone. And it worked, at least for a season. You have been carrying that question. Maybe you have been carrying it quietly, without naming it, without admitting even to yourself that it was there. But God says, it has been there. He has seen it. He has seen the way it affects how you enter new spaces, how you interact with new people, how quickly you brace yourself for another leaving before a new connection has even had time to establish itself. And today, God says that question is being permanently answered, not by a human being's choice to stay, but by a divine declaration that settles the matter once and for all. Type Amen if the question was, I not enough, has been living somewhere in your spirit since the leaving happened. God says, let me show you something about the person who left that you were not able to see from inside the relationship. Not to make you bitter toward them, not to diminish what was real about the connection you shared. What was real, and the love or care or investment you placed in that relationship came from a genuine place in you, and it was not wasted, even if it did not produce what you hoped for. But God says, alongside what was real, there were things operating in that relationship that you were not in a position to see clearly while you were inside it. This person was not inherently bad. They were not a villain who chose to enter your life with the deliberate intention of causing harm. Most people who become instruments of delay in someone else's destiny do so without any awareness that they are playing that role. They are simply living their own life, making their own choices, pursuing their own needs and desires. And the intersection of their journey with yours created a dynamic that, however meaningful it felt, was ultimately not aligned with where your life was designed to go. God says, this person carried something that was incompatible with your destiny, even if it was compatible with your heart at the time. A limitation, not a character flaw necessarily, but a boundary on how far they were able to go. And because they were unable to go where you are going, their presence in your life was functioning as an anchor, not intentionally, not maliciously, but functionally. Every relationship you are in shapes the trajectory of your life. And a relationship with someone who has a ceiling below your destiny pulls your trajectory downward toward theirs, even when the relationship itself feels like something worth staying for. The enemy understood this perfectly. The enemy knows the trajectory of your destiny better than you do, because the enemy has been trying to interrupt it for your entire life. And placing someone in your path who was genuinely lovable, genuinely compatible with your heart, but fundamentally misaligned with your destiny, that is not a crude or obvious attack. It is the kind of delay that does not look like an attack from the inside, because everything about it feels like love. God says the sophistication of the attack is the clearest evidence of the significance of what it was designed to delay. Ordinary destinies do not attract this level of strategic interference. Type Amen if understanding this about the person who left shifts something in how you have been processing their departure. God says, I want you to understand the leaving not as a loss that happened to you, but as a protection that happened for you. And I want you to understand it this way, not because the pain was not real. It was not entirely real, but because the framing of what happened determines what you are able to receive next. And if you carry the leaving as a loss, as evidence that you were not enough, as a wound that defines your expectations going forward, you will enter whatever comes next in a defensive posture, guarded, half present, waiting for the next leaving before the next arrival has even had time to prove itself. And that posture will affect what you are able to receive, even when what is coming is exactly what you have been waiting for. But if you carry the leaving as a protection, as God's hand clearing a space that was occupied by something misaligned so that what is aligned could have room to enter, you enter what comes next from a completely different dot, place, open, present, expectant without being desperate, trusting without being naive, ready to receive at the full level of what is coming rather than at the reduced level that fear and past hurt would otherwise allow. God says, the leaving created a vacancy, and vacancies in a life that belongs to God do not stay empty for long. Heaven hates an empty space that was cleared for a purpose. Every gap that God creates by removing something misaligned is immediately identified in the spirit realm as a space designated for something specific, something that has already been prepared and that has been waiting in its own spiritual holding space for the designated vacancy to appear. The departure of the one who left did not just create an empty space in your life. It created the exact conditions required for what has been designated for you to finally have somewhere to land. Type Amen if you are willing to reframe the leaving right now, in this moment. From a wound into a preparation. God says this week, not next month, not when you feel ready. not when the healing is complete and the wound has fully closed and you have arrived at some state of perfect emotional preparedness. This week, the timing is not contingent on your readiness in the way you might define readiness. The timing is determined by heaven's schedule, and heaven's schedule says this week. Okay, what is coming is not just a person, although a person may be part of it. God says the word blessing in this context is broader than one relationship. What is walking into your life this week is a comprehensive shift in the relational atmosphere around you, new connections that carry the alignment, the mutual investment, the genuine resonance that the relationship that left was unable to provide. Opportunities that open because the person who was anchoring your trajectory downward is no longer doing so. A sense of your own identity returning, the version of you that existed before you shaped yourself around another person's presence, needs, and limitations. God says, some of you will meet someone this week who seems too aligned to be coincidental, too right in too many ways at too unexpected a moment. When this happens, do not immediately trust it and do not immediately distrust it. Simply notice it. Let it unfold without forcing it or fleeing from it. What is sent by heaven does not need to be chased or manufactured. It arrives at the right time, in the right way, with the right feeling, a feeling that is distinct from the anxious excitement of attraction and closer to the calm recognition of something that your spirit already knows, even when your mind is still catching up. For others, what walks in this week will not be a romantic connection, but something equally significant, a friendship that changes your life, an opportunity that redefines your trajectory, a conversation that rearranges the way you see yourself in your future. God says, be open to all of these forms. The blessing is not limited to one expression. It is a comprehensive relational and directional shift, arriving this week in whatever form your life most needs it in right now. Type Amen and declare out loud, my real blessing is already moving toward me. What was removed created the space for what is coming, and I am open to receive it in whatever form heaven has prepared. Balen God says, before this message closes, there is something important about you that needs to be established. Not about the person who left, not about the person or blessing coming, about you, because who you are as you enter this week determines the quality of what you are able to receive in it. Okay. You are not the person who was left. That is not your identity. Even though it has felt like your identity during the season between the leaving and now, being left is something that happened to you. It is not something that defines you. And God says, as this week begins, the identity that was written over your life before you were born is reasserting itself. The version of you that exists independent of who has or has not chosen to stay. The version of you that is whole not because of another person's presence, but because of what God placed inside you before another person was ever part of the picture. Version of you walks differently. Not because you are performing confidence or pretending the wound never happened. God is not asking you to pretend anything. But because you know something now that you did not know before. You know that the leaving was protection. You know that what is coming was worth the clearing. You know that your value was never located in another person's decision to stay. And that knowledge, carried in your spirit as you move through this week, will change how you present yourself, how you receive what is coming, and how you build what comes after it. God says the people who encounter you this week will notice something. They may not be able to name it, They may simply describe it as something about you feeling different, more settled, more present, more themselves. That is because you are. The message has shifted something that needed to shift before what is coming could arrive, and the you that exists on the other side of the shift is exactly the version of you that the incoming blessing was designed to meet. Type amen if you feel that shift happening in your spirit right now. The settling, the knowing, the quiet return of a sense of yourself that the leaving temporarily displaced. Lender God says, the one who left was not your ending, they were your redirection. Every moment of pain that followed their departure, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt about your own worthiness, every day of carrying a wound that you tried to hide from the people around you, none of it was the end of your story. All of it was the passage between the chapter that closed and the chapter that is about to begin. And the chapter that is beginning this week is not a cautious, guarded, half-open chapter written by someone who learned from loss to expect less. It is a bold, fully present, wide-open chapter written by someone who allowed the loss to teach them what they needed to learn, and then handed the pen back to God and said, write what you always intended. Write what was written before the delay arrived. Write the version of this story where I receive what was always mine, God says. I am writing it. This week, beginning now. And what I am writing will make the chapter that just closed look like the necessary prologue to a story that could not have begun without it. The person who left took nothing from you that heaven was not already preparing to return in a form that fits who you actually are, rather than who you were trying to be in order to make them stay. Can type amen one final time and whisper, I am not who was left. I am who is about to receive. The removal was protection. The space is prepared. And my real blessing is walking in this week. Share this message with someone who has been carrying the pain of being left and has been using that pain as evidence of their own inadequacy. They need to hear what God just said about the leaving. And if this message reached something in you that has been waiting to be reached, express your gratitude below and walk into this week with your eyes open for what is already on its way to you.